I'm Matt Porterfield, President and CEO of Callinex Mines. We're a junior exploration company focused in northern Manitoba within the Flin Flon greenstone belt. We have two high-grade emerging copper, gold, silver, zinc deposits just in proximity infrastructure in Flin Flon, Manitoba.
Max, thank you for the introduction. Good to be talking to you again. It's been about 6 or 7, possibly even 8 months since I spoke to you last, although you caught up with Matt in October, I think. September. You're on a roll. You know, your share price has popped. You're up. You've just raised some capital. You must be feeling pretty good.
No, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling excellent. Every year has been more and more exciting the longer we've gone on since the discovery hole of Rainbow in 2020. Then later having the discovery of Alchemist last year, every year seems to be very, very exciting. So we're really pleased to get into 2023 and get to work.
And you've just raised $8.2 million. I've raised plenty of money for junior companies over my years, and I know it's always a relatively stressful time when you're kind of closing a book, and there's always a feeling of satisfaction when you've got it done. So presumably, not a dissimilar experience for you.
Yeah, no, it's one of the largest capital raises we've ever done in the company. I think the terms were amenable. We're very excited to have the capital necessary to commence our upcoming work program out at Pine Bay. In terms of shareholders, every time we always look to bring the strongest shareholders onto the registry. I think this time was no different. And I think, I'm very pleased with the outcome. I'm very excited to have the shareholders that have joined the company join and see the continued support from our existing shareholders as well. While I can't name names now, certainly I think in the future, that'll be kind of outlined, and a lot of people will be pleased with who we've brought onto the shareholder registry this time around.
Institutional names or high net worth individuals, are these kind of individuals that would recognize, or is it more kind of institutions have kind of started to join the register?
No, there'd be large institutional investors that you'd certainly know the names of, and they're very well respected. And I think at the end of the day, we've always looked to build a shareholder registry of long-term supporters that understand the business, understand what we're on to, and have a bit more foresight than the next 2-3 months per se.
And for the benefit of the viewers, could you just remind us what the terms are of the capital raise?
Yeah, certainly. So we did a financing. Each unit consisted of a one common share at $3.15 a unit, and then there was a half warrant on that $4.05. And then the charitable side of things for the charitable flow-through structure was priced at $5.67 a share after you use that leverage. And there's tremendous leverage now with critical minerals. We're very pleased, obviously, having a really rich copper discovery in general, but we're quite pleased with support on the federal level as they've opened up and give even more incentive for exploration for these minerals within Canada. So by comparison, for example, our delta on the flow-through charitable raise last time was 1.62. And that predated when they had this new critical minerals credit. Since their last raise, they implemented that. So the delta's now moved up to roughly about 1.8 is what our delta was. And I know that varies from deal to deal, but we're quite pleased with that. In Manitoba, overall, it's I think the second highest, most favorable charitable flow-through structure you can receive in all of Canada outside of Quebec. I think the delta on Quebec is like 2.1. Don't quote me on that one. Just for everyone's records, I don't raise money in Quebec. I just think that's where it's at.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's such a good thing, and having that support from the government, and that culture of mining. Is there an accelerator on those warrants out there at 405? If you get through it.
Yeah, so there is an acceleration on the warrants at 150% premium to the deal price.
Did your the structure with the warrant, was that something that your broker suggested? Was that something that your shareholders particularly wanted? Because when I'm quite often when I'm speaking to the institutions on the shareholder register, they say actually we don't want the warrants. Or was it just because it's the model in Canada?
Every investor is different. I think that we try to strike a nice balance between all investors. Certainly you'll never see or have never seen Callinex since I've been here, at least since 2014, or even predating that, ever do a full warrant or a full 5-year warrant. I think those things can be a hard pill to swallow and not necessarily good for anybody at the end of the day. So no, I mean, I think we've always, tried to make a balance between that, and quite happy with the terms. I think everybody's happy with the terms on that.
You've also, in your news releases kind of earlier this year, you say that you're kind of working towards your maiden resource estimate at Rainbow. So you've got this belt of VMS deposits on this kind of the Mill Rock growth fault, or the Mill Rock Mountain growth fault, and various kind of pods along that fault corridor. And the first one that you drilled at Rainbow, Pine Bay Rainbow, you talk about that coming to be a resource. Where are you in that process, and when can we expect it?
So all the data has been sent off to the our resource modeler, Kirkham Geosciences, Garth Kirkham. So he has all the data in hand. That was one of the things that was slowing us down, was very long assay turnarounds, but I know that we're not unique to that, so I never looked to make an excuse for anything, quite frankly. It just is what it is as far as that goes. And so he has all the data. That was one of the first announcements we put out this year, is that he's working on modeling. In terms of timing, we've given guidance within Q2 of this year, and that's directly from Garth. And, obviously we're dependent on his workload and all the things he has on his plate as well, outside of just Callinex.
Thank you. Q2's really helpful. And in addition to the resource on that, of course, you made a more recent discovery. Your discovery last year was on Alchemist, which is further to the west. And if I look at your presentation, in between them, you've got a new target called Odin. What's the outside of the resource modeling? What's your work plan for this year looking like?
So it's going to be quite exciting on a number of fronts. So we have that resource pending on Rainbow. We'll also be testing Rainbow down the plunge line at depth below the 900 meter level. I mean, 900 meters is the deepest intersection we really have in Rainbow on the discovery hole, and on a big step out it was drill hole 158. Borehole EM results in the deepest holes in Rainbow indicate that it does continue at depth, as well as it is supported by geochem. So we're going to be testing Rainbow at depth. There's also an opportunity to add or have an extension of one of the lenses to the south, roughly between the 500 meter level down to the 900 meter level. And that was supported by borehole EM results on the initial discovery hole. When we initially hit Rainbow, there was multiple conductors within that hole. We focused on the primary conductor, which ultimately emerged as the orange zone in the Rainbow deposit. So there was another anomaly that we'll be testing as part of the exploration right around the immediate vicinity of Rainbow. And then along that growth fault corridor, we'll be testing vertically above the last intersections in Alchemist, as well as vertically below, to see if that, picks up and proves where that leads us. And then in terms of target area Odin, we're all very, very excited about. Now, it's something that we were excited about last year, probably the last time we spoke, is what we're working on there. And, with that area overall, we were vectoring last year, tasting some borehole EM anomalies. We actually intersected the Odin horizon, we'll call it, in the last hole, PBM 191, and that returns some of the highest precious metal intervals that you see on the entire property, and that's over, at this point, I think over 850 drill holes or so. And so that's important in multiple levels. We ran half meter of 5 gram per ton gold, which is very, very high grade gold in terms of, context of these VMS systems. But more importantly, it was the silver, because it was over 50 gram per ton silver. And why that's important is that when you vector to these VMS systems, you're looking for zinc or high-grade silver distal to a VMS deposit. So we're waiting geochem data from those drill holes in the Odin target area, as well as borehole EM from another hole that we drilled in that area that we need to follow up on. But everything's shaping up very, very nicely for Odin, given that intersection on the horizon, which we'll call the Odin horizon. And that sits on the edge of a very, very large chargeability iso shell. In fact, it's the largest chargeability iso shell in the entire IP surveyed area for any area that we covered with IP to date. There's one caveat in terms of IP. We didn't have and don't have IP data over at Alchemist. That was just an area that wasn't collected at the time we did the survey. There's no doubt, obviously, it would have represented a very large chargeability iso shell. We know that from the geology we intersected. But in terms of Odin, everything's, setting up beautifully. So we're looking to test that target area at some point in the campaign, as soon as we get the geochem data back and probe the hole, which will happen, very, very soon in the next few weeks.
Can I just go way back to a comment you made a long time ago? You said that when you're going to be testing Rainbow, you said you've got indications from the geochemistry that it continues at depth. How does that work? Because these bodies are kind of subvertical, as far as I understand it. What's your geochemical indicator that there's continuity at depth? Surely that would be a geological and geophysical vector rather than a geochemical one.
Well, no, the geochem is just a numerical quantity for your alteration system. So if you look at the deepest holes into Rainbow, you're seeing increased chloride alteration and sericide alteration, and that'll be in your geochem data provided with you'd be cooler more closer to the surface.
Okay, so the chemistry of the data from your lower drill hole suggests that there's continuity. Sorry, so I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't surface geochem.
Geochemical data from the existing drill data. So when we do that, we'll look at thallium. There's different indices that we'll look at in terms of Hashimoto indexes, Spitz-Starling indices. And those are the type of things that I'm not an expert at per se. I don't understand them enough to make me dangerous, so to speak. And that's really where Jim comes in with his technical skill set on our team, is analyzing the geochem data. But it's for geochemistry. And really when we do vectoring, we're looking at the 3 Gs: geology, geochemistry, and geophysics. So sorry if I misworded that earlier.
No, you didn't. I just ran down one rabbit hole when it was a different rabbit hole. Good. So you've talked about the 3 programs. You've talked about doing some deeper drilling at Rainbow, and then chasing another of the lenses, which wasn't the orange lens. You've talked about doing some more drilling above and below your intercepts at Alchemist, and then drilling at Odin as well. Can you give me a kind of a timeline of when the drill's going to hop between the projects and a rough total? I mean, do you think about? Have you got a kind of a starting meterage in your head for this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's first pass. One other area that I didn't mention that we will look to test this year is over on the cabin horizon. And I'll just, before I touch on the rest, but in terms of cabin horizon is adjacent to the largest, this very large alteration system map at surface. It spans 700 by 1100 meters. Geochemistry at depth are lighting up very, very strong. They always have been. And that's where we had some high-grade intercepts at depth in 2016. It was really our first discovery was over on the cabin horizon. By the time we couldn't replicate that. So based upon a lot of the work that we've done over the past several years, obviously, we're revisiting the cabin horizon, and we'll be testing there. Now, in terms of size, and the reason for that being such a big deal, that's where Plastodome was really focused on for the 30 million ton exploration target. That's where you have that very large alteration system mapped at surface. And that alteration being so large is really one of the key ingredients why Plastodome applied for a 30 million ton target in the area. And it was always on the thesis that the system is overturned in that part of the property, and then you'd have the high grade displaced to depth. And we proved that as a proof of concept with the discovery hole in 2016. We just couldn't replicate on it, but we're going to be revisiting that again based upon, a refreshed look on the cabin horizon. Now, in terms of size of initial program, we haven't announced that formally, but you're looking probably around the ballpark of about 10,000 meter campaign to test Rainbow at depth, as I mentioned. Alchemist, follow up on Odin, and deepen and wedge off some holes over it at the cabin horizon to get that work necessary. And then, of course, the follow-up to that
contingent on, based on results. So just when you say over on the cabin horizon, you've got 2 blocks of properties, haven't you? And so I'm assuming that you're talking about the western concession area.
Right. So within the Pine Bay project, the cabin horizon will sit roughly, I'd say, about within a kilometer of Rainbow. It's further along the growth fault corridor, but you're going over to the east on the growth fault corridor as opposed to focusing on the west. We've been focusing on the most proximal part of that growth fault corridor with great success, but at the same time, you've got to constantly evolve and constantly revisit things, the work that you've done, because there was a lot of work that was done. There was a lot invested into that. And then we have an opportunity to leverage off of that work in a low-cost way to test some thesis that we've come up with since that time. And, that's really the biggest bang for your buck, is to follow up on things that and then do it in a low-cost way.
And once you've got your maiden resource on Rainbow, what's the strategy at that point? Will you be, because there are two ways you can go. One is you can kind of focus on adding more tons at Alchemist, Odin, Cabinet Bay, wherever, so you can continue the growth approach to grow that resource base, or you can go down, let's define the economics, let's wrap some economics around this resource that we have defined at this point, or maybe you're going to do both. What's the strategy?
Well, no, I think we're obviously focused on exploration here in 2023. That's going to be the immediate focus moving forward. I mean, I have been working on things on moving the project forward in other ways and in different avenues. I think it's too early to speak on that, but we have been speaking to policymakers about the current state and what we can do, and from our perspective as a private company that's really focused on creating jobs for that community, but at the same time, we've got to be cognizant on our limitations to capital requirements and where we're going to give the biggest upside for our shareholders. And quite frankly, that's going to be on the exploration side of things, all else being equal. But we will be looking into de-risking in other ways, in other low-cost ways, as we move through things forward. But again, I think it'd be premature to speak about things that really aren't set in stone just right now.
Gotcha. And just to put things in context, when you talk about the local community, when we last spoke, I think the 777 mine was just about to close, and it has closed now. So there's huge changes in the local area, aren't there?
Yeah, on multiple fronts, I think there's been big changes. Certainly, the community is dealing with the job losses. They have transferred some of those jobs over to Snow Lake. I can tell you, I mean, even since the mine did shut down, there has been an increase in crime within the community, which is unfortunate, but I think that's not something that probably be not seen anywhere else. I think it's probably amplified given the local impact of what's going on, as opposed to everything else that's kind of tough going on around the world today. But, certainly that when we go to Flin Flon or visiting the town, there's a lot of support coming from the community. We were there just over the winter, and, I can tell you that the locals bring cookies to the drillers, stuff like that. So, and those are things that, really send a strong message to people that work with the organization and make people excited to come to work at Pine Bay. So there's no problem finding drillers because it's a quite peaceful place, and you get people delivering you cookies from time to time. So, we remain steadfast with our long-term vision, and to execute on the long-term vision, we've got to hit holes through drilling. We've been very successful at doing that over the past several years. I mean, our team's success predates even that work, and we look to have more success in 2023. And in terms of the maiden resource, I think the maiden resource is going to show what Rainbow is, and what Rainbow is in relation to other mines that have historically, or to other deposits that have historically been mined in the past. And it'll give a good pulse to not only ourselves, I think we have a pretty good handle on where we're at, but to policymakers, stakeholders, shareholders, all of that. It's really quantify that, because Rainbow is so unique in that you don't really have a good comp for a Rainbow. There's not many Rainbows out there, which is says a lot about Rainbow. But, in terms of normal deposits, I was talking to an investor just the other day, and they were having a tough time wrapping their head around what Rainbow was worth or what it is, because they're looking at porphyry. And when you look at a lot of these porphyry systems where you're looking to move, 10 to 15 times the volume, if not more, relative to the type of volume moving a high grade, it's just a different animal. So I'm very excited about publishing the resource at Rainbow. It's a key milestone for us. We'll be also updating the historic resource at Pine Bay with a guidance of, roughly 5 million tons between the two. And again, those sit right next to that hydroelectric power line with road access to the community there.
When you say that the investors are struggling to get their head around it, and you're saying that it's unique or it's differentiated from the crowd, in what sense?
Well, high grade. I mean, I think if you look at the grades, there's not too many high grade copper deposits around the world. That's why they're unique. Most people are looking at big porphyry targets nowadays. porphyry targets, go in vogue. But if you look at the major part of copper production globally, the average grade of copper mined around the world is less than 0.5%. So when you're out there announcing super high grades, we're averaging, 3.5-4% copper, the grade to tonnage relative to a big low grade, big volume operation in the economics that surround something like that are, obviously like night and day in relation to another. So high grade discoveries don't come often, and that's what I was trying to convey is that when you're looking at one thing, and then you're looking at the stable of horses, and the unicorn walks by, you're not used to seeing the unicorn. You're like, how do you value a unicorn?
And why are you giving a guidance of 5 million tons for the? Did you say you were giving guidance of 5 million tons?
That's the earmark behind the two. That's based upon the historic resource at Pine Bay, as well as doing back of the envelope in terms of grades and widths that we're seeing at Rainbow, be roughly about 4 million tons at Rainbow open at depth. Now, when you put that in I'm sorry?
Of material, 4 million tons of resource.
That's correct, yeah. Back of the envelope based upon, going on at each 100-meter level, and taking the average grade and average, true width. We have specific gravity measurements, and then doing a back of the envelope, that's where you get, a number right around 4 million tons. And then when you stack that in terms of relation to other mines in Flin Flon's history, if you look at the initial reserves of the mines in Flin Flon's history, there's only, 2 other mines in Flin Flon's history, 29 mines in that whole greenstone belt, where the Maiden reserve was over 3 million tons for a deposit. And of course, the big thing in these VMS systems in general is that once you get into these systems, they grow. So, for example, if you look at 777, its maiden reserve was less than 3 million tons or so. Obviously, the indications to be much larger, and turned out to be 26 million plus tons. If you look at Trout Lake's maiden reserve was sub 3 million tons. I think that was 2.7 million tons, and it turned into 21 million tons. And again, that's because these systems go deep. 777 started at 900 meters vertical depth. I think that's unique about Rainbow. Rainbow's starts within 100 meters of surface. So it's a very shallow discovery. It's the most shallow discovery in over 3 decades within 30 kilometers of Flin Flon. So that's kind of what I was, in terms of guidance and where we see Rainbow and how unique Rainbow is. It's going to be one of the largest, and no, we're not going to be up to the reserve basis, but certainly in terms of resources, comparing that to the work producers, it'll stack up quite well. Because, really it was a 62 million ton Flin Flon ore body that got over 15 million tons out of the gate. That deposit outcrops at surface. And outside of that was Lawler, that went over 10 million tons on an initial reserve basis. But, Lawler's, dips at a 50-degree angle, so it's like drilling out a pancake. And again, in terms of depth, Lawler tops out at 550 meters vertical depth. In discovery hole depth was similar to Rainbow.
Thank you. It's really helpful just to reiterate this context and the kind of talk about the productivity of the belt and the unique attributes of each deposit, particularly Rainbow. In these kinds of deposits, in volcanogenic massive sulfides, VMSs, one of the big questions is around mineralogy and metallurgical response. Where are you on that test work journey?
Yeah, so we haven't completed any test work at Rainbow. There's a lot of knowledge on the mineralization in the area. I know all the deposits from deposit to deposit are different. In terms of the Pine Bay deposit, that deposit was actually taking a feasibility study twice. The last time was in 1973 or so by Hut Bay. There was no problems with the metallurgical standpoint. So there isn't a deposit in Flin Flon to date that hasn't had, or that has had, metallurgical problems that led it to not being able to, go into a production type scenario. But in terms of Rainbow itself, we haven't done any met work on Rainbow. But in terms of, rock competency and all that, it's quite favorable.
And have you got any plans to do, even if it's just petrography work across all of the deposit, or kind of, do you have a kind of metallurgical program that you want to start at some stage?
At some stage, but at the same time, we're always, balancing limited budgets. Even when you raise more money, the money doesn't go as far as it once did. And so with that being said, you have to manage your budgets. You have to manage budgets to where, we drill this hole. What do we learn, and what's the upside to our investors? And right now, with the limited capital out there and, ability to, manage dilution, of course, to meet milestones, it makes more sense for us in the immediate term, at least, to do the exploration work and focus on that. Now, as I mentioned, I am working in ways to try to get that kind of work done in the future. But again, that wouldn't be from the curve capital that we've raised for our exploration focus. Right now is really focused on building scale, building more tons, and we have a great opportunity to do that. We've already, well on the way, I think, to have that opportunity at Alchemist. Certainly indications that Odin are really promising. And, Rainbow is what Rainbow is. And at the end of the day, you got to test Rainbow at depth as part of the process. We got here by not being afraid of failure. And so we'll continue to take the shots that we need to take to get us to where we need to get. And that's part of expanding the exit discovery. So, I guess it's a good segue because we did recently bring it and have strengthened our team. We publicly announced Peter R. Jones joining our team. We've others that will be joining our team in the near future that are already working on our behalf in one way or another. But that also kind of transitions us to bring in the skills and the people with the skill set, I should say, to take us to the next level moving forward and thinking those type of things through. So, quite pleased to have Peter on because, aside from being an amazing engineer, Peter is as an entrepreneurial spirit, just like the rest of us here at Callinex, was, integral in the RTO of on zinc to acquire what's now the Hut Bay assets and Flin Flon assets for 777 from Anglo, oversaw the development and construction, financing of 777, oversaw the discovery of Lawler and the initial development of Lawler, and set the tone for Hut Bay to become what Hut Bay is prior to retiring in 2010 from Hut Bay. And so to add Peter on the team, as it should hopefully brings a strong vote of confidence. Peter's done his own work on what we had as discovery. I don't think Peter just certainly joins anything just because someone calls him up and says, hey, you want to go have some fun? But certainly quite pleased to have him on the team because, if you look at Callinex, we have this strong technical exploration skill set. And Peter, as an engineer goes, they always say, engineers don't like exploration, but Peter likes exploration. Peter understands where we are as an organization, where we're heading. But again, you have to have that foresight as you look further down the road in terms of the next steps. And Peter can certainly bring that with his vast experience on multiple fronts, aside from just being an amazing engineer. Because
and
it was no.
Did you really not?
Yeah.
Did you really not just call him up and say, do you want to have some fun? Surely that's part of the conversation.
Well, it's always part of the conversation, but everybody comes at their own time and on their own terms, and that's just part of it. I think if you're trying to recruit a all-star basketball team, or football team or whatever sports team, and you go try to court someone to join your team, there's got to be on their terms. They want to be able to feel that they can add value and play. Because everybody on the team isn't necessarily driven by money. I get that question a lot of times. And it's like, oh, well, how's everybody incentivized? And it's amusing to me in many ways is that everybody seems to be so lost on the fact that you can be incentivized in life by something other than money. And I don't know if I have to be talking to investors in the context of investing, but surely the team are, at a particular stage in their career where I would say money isn't something that they've done well enough in their life that isn't a worry for them. And so at the end of the day, you go, and really it is that you can come back and make change for a community that you've made change for before. And that, I think, experience is fulfilling. And it's certainly, I want to do well financially. Of course, everybody wants to do well financially in life, unless you got your screw loose a bit. But, you want to do that by, creating something for others. And that's the exciting part of exploration. That's the exciting part in terms of our discoveries is the immediate impact that they can have on a community out there. Because that's the other thing is as we build the team to strengthen the team to try to, look to advances in how we can strengthen things and move things forward in the future, you got to put things in context of what's been done before and how can we, do that again or improve it. And, the Reed Lake mine, which I didn't touch on in this conversation, we probably talked on the Bast, but Reed Lake was located 100 kilometers away from Flin Flon when it was discovered on an option agreement with Hud Bay in 2010. Hud Bay got involved in 2013. That was in construction by 2014, or late 2013, early 2014, and ended up producing for 2.5 years at half the copper price that we're at today, 3 times the distance where we are, and the deposit size was, again, half the size roughly of where we are at Pine Bay. But not only were they able to permit it and get in production so quickly, but that was actually within a provincial park, which I think a lot of people aren't aware of. If you look at Lawler, which is the major mine in Snow Lake now, from construction papers, from the project description, which is where you have all your studies done, and then you put your project description in, they got construction papers within 12 months, which to my knowledge is a record in Canada. So again, the permitting regime is there to meet the needs. There's certainly support on even higher on the federal level with these critical minerals within Canada. And so again, we just need to execute and bring the people that have done it before alongside, so that when we reach that stage as an organization, it's not like we're scrambling to, we're not reactionary. I don't ever try to be a reactionary person. I don't wait for something to happen to me to then go do something. That's how we got here in the first place. We said, hey, there's a business opportunity because this town's going to need it. Let's go do something about it, as opposed to, oh no, there is no mine. What are we going to do? And then wait around till there's no mine, right? Then we would have been starting at or one.
Yeah, no, and it looks like you've got all the ingredients. You've just got the cash raised. You're adding good people to the team in the form of Peter R. Jones. Maybe during the course of this year, you'll get a resource geologist, so you can bring that in-house rather than external. And you've got a year of exploration and discovery, so it should be a cracker. Yeah, no,
we have a tight cap table too. I mean, every time you do a capital raise, you want to make sure that the people are they're in their car wanting to race the race for you. They're not looking to jump out of the next pit stop, right? So we definitely, I think, have the shareholders that see the technical aspects of what we're on to, the value that we're on to, that we're looking to drive, and the longer term catalysts that can make everybody a lot of money. And, there's certainly, the largest order in our recent financing, you won't typically see them in a registry of a company our size, to my knowledge, at least. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I don't think so. And so I think that, again, it's having a stable, supportive capital is also key for our shares to perform well in the open market.
Great. Well, good luck. Thank you very much for the update. It's been timely. I look forward to going over the resource when it comes out, the new, the Maiden resource on Rainbow, and hopefully it'll be accompanied with some drill results and some news on Odin and Alchemist at the same time.
Yes, certainly. No, I look forward to it. And again, we'll be announcing when we'll get drilling, but it shouldn't be too far in the distant future. And the only thing I'll round that out with is patience, because when you drill deep holes, they do take time. And that is something that anybody that is new to Callinex should understand before investing, is anticipate before you participate, as they say. And so again, we do drill deeper holes than the average drill company and exploration company. That's just the nature of what we're into. So time is, patience is necessary.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.